Welcome to Season 2 of Discover the Difference, a podcast brought to you by C3. My name's Jamie Reid, and I'm your host. If you're joining us for the first time, we're going to do a season recap. Our buddy Wayne Partello stopped by, interviews Gabe and I on the season highlights from Season 1, and we give our opinions of the favorite moments that we had, questions and answers that were unique with each one of our podcasts that came on. It's a great way, if you're joining us for the first time, to see what the podcast is all about. As we head into Season 2, we have an amazing lineup. We've got entrepreneurs, leadership coaches, Olympians that join us. It's just going to be a fantastic season. I'm so excited to share it with you. So enjoy this recap of Season 1 and join us for the episodes that we'll release on Season 2 coming up shortly. Thanks so much.
Wait, I've actually never been on this podcast, and now I'm hosting it? This is great. I love it. What's going on, guys? I'm Wayne. I'm the CEO, co-founder of CUENTO. Actually been friends with these guys for, 8-9 years now. Long time. I didn't have gray hair, and neither did Jamie. But Gabe always has.
Long enough to see an entire wardrobe of pink flamingo shirts.
Come on. And why not? And so thanks for having me to come in, and we're gonna go back in time and go through Season 1 of your podcast, which is super cool, and then we're gonna kind of preview a little bit of what's to come and the fun that's ahead of us. But I think I wanted to go back even further than that. We've been talking about why the heck would two insurance guys want to have a podcast? Like, what were you guys thinking?
Wasn't it your idea?
Yeah.
I think it was your idea, first of all.
What genius came up with this idea?
Good plug to CUENTO there.
Yeah, thanks.
In reality, the primary job of insurance people is to help tell stories. It's really to learn what's going on with businesses, what's going on with their risks, what's happening with claims, be able to put that into some context and deliver that story to insurance companies so they can consume it and do what they do with it. And so it just partners well with what we do, because what C3 likes to do is spend a ton of time up front in discovery, really getting to know operations like we can run their companies. I mean, we say that facetiously, right? We couldn't run their company. But with the respective insurance people, we want to know it better than anyone else. And it's important because the insurers know that's our brand, that when we're bringing a company to them, we know it better than any insurance person who's ever met with them. So this idea of, it's very well aligned with your brand of telling the story, right? Just bringing people in, have nothing to do with insurance, and focus on the person sitting across the table and learn everything we can about them.
Yeah, I think what you guys have done, and some of the people, and we're going to talk about some of the people you've had on in Season 1, but the whole journey of also sharing the fact that you guys are going about a pretty old industry differently, right? Like the whole brand of Discover the Difference is that you guys, you do spend time in discovery, but it's sort of a play on word that you also, that's very different for your industry.
Yeah, I think discovery is the key part, is when you really are inquisitive and you're asking questions and then you leave space for them to answer, and you're really listening to what they have to say, then you're really able to, help put together something that is going to be meaningful to them. And when we started this podcast, we didn't really know, how it would evolve. And we, intentionally said, we don't want it to be about insurance. We really want it to be about, the person or their business or their success or where they've, found success and who they are. And that's really feeds into, how we do business. And so it's been super, super cool to just learn about, all these different people and their companies and what they've done, and be able to, take that and take that with, for our audience and also for us.
One of my uses for podcasts, and I think a lot of people, is it's a learning tool, right? And one of the things that you guys do as an insurance company is become a resource And whether that's resource of like if there's a claim and they need help, right? You guys are there. You have a whole department that does that. But even just as a resource of like, hey, we want to use our office as a place where people can congregate and come together and learn from each other, best practices, bringing guest speakers. This is sort of, in the world where we were in COVID, trying to figure out how to continue to be a resource. And I think that resource, you've uncovered some pretty cool storylines along the way too.
I think it's part selfish too for Gabe and I to help fuel our culture. Because the best businesses, the best salespeople, they're curious. And curiosity is really about what he said, wanting to listen and not just interacting with somebody in a business context where you're waiting for them to stop talking because you've got the loaded next thing to say. And that's the culture we try to build, whether it's in a sales, service, or just relationship. It's like really spending time hearing what people have to say. Understand their position first, because if we don't understand that, like, we don't really have a relationship. We're just another guy. And so that's part of our culture that's very intentional.
So you guys created C3. What year was that?
2017.
2017.
Well, we filed in 2016.
Okay.
And we started selling insurance in 2017.
I know a little bit about that as well. So 2017, you're officially, going, and here we are. You just celebrated your 5-year anniversary. You had a party, of course. You had a party.
Gotta have a party.
Always have a party.
Yeah. There's always a reason to have a party. Right?
Yeah. So real quick, like 5 years. Where did you see C3 being when you started this 5 years from now? I mean, it's hard when you start as a startup imagining what 5 years from now looks like. But now you're there. Looking back, any sort of highlights, any moments that come to mind that you're just like, damn, we did that.
Well, I think at the beginning is always the most scary, right? When you start a business.
So hard.
And you don't,
What?
you know it's going to be hard, but you don't know where it's going to be hard, and you try to anticipate everything. And at the end of the day, when you look back, you're like, wow, I didn't realize that was going to be so hard. But it's fun to look back and see, hey, we did this. I remember the beginning days where you're like, oh, we just need to make sure we make payroll. That's number one, and then we're well beyond that, obviously. And it's just fun to see, we had this vision of this culture of people feeling empowered and really, going to a place where they wanted to go to work, and everybody being connected in that way. And so to see that happen after 5 years is really cool.
I think it's interesting because like what the Padres are doing, you plan your work, you work your plan, and their ultimate goal is to win a World Series. And when they realize that, they're in some contexts they're going to say we're exactly where we said and planned and worked to be. In the other so that is where we are. We're exactly where we, every year we map out the next 5, and every year we outpace it just a little bit, but it's along a plan. However, there's victories along the way that when you feel those moments, like winning a World Series, you can't plan that, right? It's unparalleled emotion, excitement, fun, and it just feels good. And so, like, getting to 5 years, we're where we thought we would be. But how does it feel? It feels amazing, like way better than you could just write out on a plan.
Yeah. Yeah, the feeling, to your point, like those little accomplishments do actually feel amazing. And, I know I'm very similar to you guys in this regard, that we do take moments to pause. Like, I think living in San Diego forces you to
Definitely
do that.
helps.
Right? Like, because I have friends that live all over the country. They don't do it as much as I think people who live here. I think I got off a plane this week, and actually it was really funny. I was getting on the plane, and the stewardess was like, I think because of my shirt selections, are you going on vacation?
She's like, you're from Fort Lauderdale, right?
Yeah. Are you
or
going,
Palm Springs.
Yeah. I mean, are you going on vacation? Because you must be so excited. Or are you going home? And I said, I'm going home. And she said, I was in Seattle coming to San Diego. And she was like, so are we. I was like, how lucky are we that they get to say that? So I think we also take those moments to reflect on the journey that we've been on. I mean, you guys started as just the two of you, right? And now how many employees at C3?
We're threatening 100.
Wow. That's a huge accomplishment, and in this city to build a business, and that's awesome. So congrats to you guys on that.
Thanks, man.
I think it's a good point about taking stock and being grateful. So
Seriously.
It's a lot of people to make all this happen, and so it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, it is. I say this all the time, and you have a vision and a dream in your head, and it's great when you find a partner that's like, yeah, no, I agree with that too. Yeah, I want to do that. Like, that's amazing. But when other people start leaving their livelihoods to come join you on that journey, I don't know. That was a moment for me where I was like, oh, wow. Like, they believe in what we're going to do. And you guys have, I mean, you're almost 100 of those now.
I don't know what the TED Talk is, but there's a TED Talk where there's a dude at like a music festival that gets up and is dancing like an absolute maniac. And the TED Talk's talking about these fearless leaders who go into this space by themselves. And he's the first guy up, you know, dancing more obnoxious than Ellen or something like that. And then the TED Talk guy walks through the next person who is maybe the most important. They validate that person, you know, and then the role of the third person starts a momentum, and it's cool. Now, eventually, like 50 people end up dancing with this guy, and that's kind of where we've arrived now.
Yeah.
So it's cool to be past having to break all that ground, you know?
Yeah, because, you know, we started with a bamboo book. You know, it was a Japanese menu, and people just, you know, we had our vision, but we didn't have an office, and we didn't have anything, and people jumped aboard, so it's pretty cool.
We're 5 years into this thing. We're a year into the podcast. We've watched, I can speak from my perspective, my seat, I've gotten to see your brand evolve, right? From, you know, I had this conversation with someone the other day that as we're fortunate that we get to meet with business leaders all the time, right? You guys are sitting down with customers and you're learning things from them all the time. And I heard someone say this to me the other day was where your business takes huge leaps is when you realize as the founder that there are things that you've got to just give up, that they're not going to be your strength, right? As the business grows, you're going to bring in experts to do certain things. And your brand over the last, I would say 3 years has really accelerated. Like you guys, you've brought in a lot of experts across the board and specialists, you know. What is it like now sitting back, not being able to do everything? Right? Because you can't.
It's exciting.
Right.
You don't have to. You don't have to.
It's a different feeling, right? Like you went from
Yeah.
literally calling every client. You at a certain point you have to, you know, to release the valve a little bit to give out and trust those people, which is also scary.
It is really interesting for me because I started intentionally in a space where I could be everything to all my clients. You know, I had claims, loss control, all that background. Well, you have a ceiling when that's who you are. And so as we started C3 and we were evaluating, hey, what do we want to be? It was a different game plan, you know? And so it is really nice. Like Gabe's saying, it's the first time since I've been in 15, 16 years in San Diego that we have these rock stars and we can go on an executive retreat or a family vacation, not totally be stressed. So the people that we've been able to attract is the key because we have the best. And it really is allows you to sleep at night or take a break, you know? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, you know, having those people that, you know, really level up makes all the difference. And, you know, part of our vision was you create a really great place, good culture, exciting place to come to work, and you'll attract the best people. And when we attract the best people, we can provide the best, you know, service. And that really allows, you know, Jamie and myself to, you know, not have to be on the gas pedal all the time because everyone else is.
Yeah. No, that's great.
So it's awesome.
All right, so let's go through season 1 because there are some amazing stories and you know, I want to talk about the episodes, but I also want to talk about some of the anecdotal little moments that have come along of just like, you know, when you do a business, I say this all the time, when you do a business focused podcast, it's not about reaching millions of people. It's about hopefully somebody needed to hear that story that day and you provided that for them, right? And that's an important part. But you guys have spoke to some pretty cool people and entrepreneurs and just different all over the place. So let's start at the top. So first episode that we actually recorded, first one last year was Coastal Payroll. And I know you guys have worked with those guys for a long time. And that was, you know, we were in COVID. There was like somebody was on a remote, somebody was there, you know, but anything that stands out to you from the conversation that you had with those guys?
Well, I'm just appreciative of them because Johnny and Craig are friends. We kind of grew up together, if you will. You know, they came into their industry about the same time that we came into ours, and we've known each other over that period of time. So it's really fun to watch them grow and evolve and have all the success they did while we're doing that in parallel. And it was just nice because I was nervous as hell. You know, like to do this stuff, we're insurance guys. And when I watch those early episodes, I'm like, oh my God, that sucked. You know, I'm so rigid and stiff. And,
but evolved.
And I'm thinking about questions. I'm not doing what we normally do where I'm listening, you know. And so it was nice having comfortable people that we're close to the veil to go through it. And they're great sports and they did a great job. So
I think that they were also relatable to us because they were two partners with different skills and that complemented each other. So that was interesting to hear. We kind of stole some ideas from them and, you know, have implemented it within our own organization. They really focused on, you know, what their core values are. And they're intentionally spent, you know, every month talking about one of them, which we've incorporated. So
that's great.
It's something like, it's really cool to get that, you know, to hear that and then use it.
Yeah. But Johnny's a lot like Scott Mason, our last guest, in that he's just inspirational to listen to. I mean, the guy can magnify anything, any audience he has in front of him. And I listened to that episode more than any other episode. I've listened to it 3 full times from start to finish because of some of the culture things. You know, like you can think you're good at culture and intentional. But there's always ways that you're hearing how somebody else is doing something where you're like, hey, this will help us level up or get us back on course. How he talks about it is that their culture was this living, breathing organism that had to be constantly nurtured. And when they didn't, you know, water that plant, it wilts, you know, and how he described it in his words really resonated with me, where I'm like, oh, this is something we can't just set up shop and declare it. Like, we really have to nurture it, and they do a great job of it.
Yeah, it was very clear that everything they did was purposeful.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't just magically happen. They put in the time, the effort. To your point about the plan of where you guys wanted to go as a business, you could feel very clearly that they had a plan on how they were going to nurture their team as well. So it's good. Awesome. Okay, next, go in a completely different direction, and you bring in the first – it was actually – you know, Coastal was the first episode we recorded, but the first episode we released was Nick Hardwick, former San Diego Charger when they were the San Diego Chargers. But I know you guys have a great relationship with Nick, and he's got an incredible story. Anything that stands out to you from that episode?
I mean, I think, you know, his story about, you know, walking on and how he just envisioned himself as everything he did was about excellence. You know, how am I going to be the best? And he just internalized that, and he had the work ethic and the, you know, the vision and the charge. And so in everything he did in his, you know, all the way up to, you know, walking on, you know, in college for Purdue. And then all the little things that happened, his story about all the things that happened that seemed like luck, but, you know, luck happens from hard work and a vision.
Look at this, Purdue walk-on tryouts. You want to try? And I was like, well, I can't be a pilot. Sure, dude, I'll try. And so we got permission to go train. We started training for several months. I went to the Rose Bowl, watched the team lose to Washington, and the next month, basically, I tried out with 105 other dudes who wanted to be a part of this awesome team. And I happened to be one of 5 guys that made the team. And the football story is the rest of its history, I guess. It happened. It was crazy.
It was just really fascinating. And that's where he became, you know, I think the most snaps from any Charger player, you know, 2-time Pro Bowler. I think he had a very long 13-year career at the Chargers, very successful. And now he's a very successful business that's come out of that. So it was just there's so many nuggets to learn from him.
He's jacked right now.
He's like 0% body fat.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like, he is just shredded.
I'll see Arlene like looking at it. I'm like, get off his Instagram. What are you doing?
You know you're lying. Arlene sees you on there.
Nick's just. I don't remember the specific moments because almost everything we talked about I'd heard or discussed with him in the past, but he's such an introspective person who constantly is challenging himself to evolve and get better, while at the same time, he's probably one of the most approachable, famous people, stars, whatever. I've never met an entire person out of our community who ran into Nick who said anything but positive about him. And so I think what was cool about what I do remember about the podcast, he's very comfortable because we've known him for so long, but we might have just asked one question.
Yeah. And
Nick just was like, all right, I know this is the beginning. I'm a mic guy, so I'm just going to run. And
he's very talented.
It was pretty cool that for guys who don't know how to, administer a podcast, that you can have a guest on like that is sort of self-fulfilling. And so that was pretty cool.
Yeah. And he's done the radio thing. He's done the play-by-play. I mean, he's been around the broadcast world for a long time, but I think he's so comfortable with Nick. He's really come to that point. And I've, obviously gotten to know Nick a little bit through your relationship with him and seeing him really get comfortable with, who he is. And, I think the journey that he went on post playing career, which is very common for a lot of athletes after their playing career is over, to really figure out what was going to fulfill him every day. And I love seeing his Instagram where he's, he rode his bike. The kids rode their bike to school the other day. I don't know if you saw that story.
Yeah,
it was the greatest. It was the greatest thing. You can see
they're leading a movement.
Yeah, leading a
bike
movement
riding.
that because he's so focused on fitness, they're focused, and it's pretty neat. So he's just he's an awesome
and a
guy.
funny story I'll tell about him. The first time Arlene and I went on a double date with him and Jamie, and in true Midwestern fashion, we're supposed to pick them up at 6, and at 6 we come around the corner and they're sitting on their porch, but his porch was up above, and he had to walk down, and he had to force himself to push 280, 290. And as he's walking down, I'm like, bro, are you okay?
Oof.
He looked like his knees were just gonna buckle out and blow, and he's like, you don't know how hard it is to carry this weight around. When I quit football, I'm going to lose 100 pounds overnight, and I'm going to be healthy. And that was probably 12, 15 years ago. Wow. And so to watch him do that, and now to have his brand, Lose Like a Lineman, just really cool to see somebody have a long-term vision and go knock it out.
Well, to your point, Gabe, it's so funny that people have had success. It's very easy for others to look and go, oh, they got lucky, right? Like Nick got lucky. He was one of 5 guys who made the team of 100 plus that tried out, right? And it's like, oh, he was so lucky. It was like, well, those same principles that got him to be that guy are the same principles that now have him, the guy who is so committed and driven to be healthy for his family. And it's pretty amazing because, I spent a little time in the NFL, not playing obviously, but getting to know a lot of guys who did play, and the post, the health side of that, especially for linemen that do have to carry that weight, that it's so easy to consume all that food because it feels good. And then when you're done playing, you're not carrying it healthy anymore, and he's helped a lot of people figure that out.
Yeah,
and so,
definitely.
One of his, obviously he's talented from an athlete point of view, but one of the things that I was always impressed of is how he's able to connect with people so well. And I just remember we went surfing with him one day, and we stopped at an OB, and we stopped at a donut place, and he was in the back talking with the dishwasher, and that was his friend, and it's just, that's his personality. He just connects with everybody.
Yeah, no, he's a good human, which
He
is
is.
what
He really
it
is.
all comes down
Very
to.
genuine.
And also, was also an episode from you guys that people saw, people consumed that because it was like, wait, why are these insurance guys talking about football? And it was like, because that's how we are. We're doing this different. It's great. All right, so then. You guys have done a lot of work with the California Trucking Association. You brought them on the podcast to sort of talk about the work, but also what they do and their industry, which I know, Jamie, you and I have spoken to that group a few times. Anything stand out for you through that episode?
Well, Eric Sauer's he's another great human being. And the purpose of where we want to continue to evolve the podcast is to bring on business leaders, entrepreneurs, people who can tell their story about how they did it or how they built culture. And then 2 other segments. One is people who serve freedom, military, etc. And then political. I think a lot of people don't understand what happens behind the veil of politics. And so Eric Sauers, leads the political efforts of the California Trucking Association. Might not sound as sexy as insurance, but I think the whole supply chain issue recently really cast a light on it, and that industry is getting murdered across all kinds of boards. And I've sat in rooms with Eric Sauer where politicians said every commercial truck is going to be electric by this date, and then we start saying, well, FedEx has 1,000 trucks that get gas right now off-site. Now they have to put them in a yard and charge them in Long Beach. How does that work? And they're like, we don't know. Figure it out. Well, what that means is hyperinflation for all goods, because every single thing we consume is coming from a truck that delivered it there.
Yep.
And so I think aside from the global supply chain issues, a lot of America who isn't totally involved in politics doesn't understand it. And so having him on and just telling his story of how he got to where he is and how purposeful advocacy is for certain industry groups is really an important thing.
Yeah, I think just the whole trucking industry, like having that awareness, how much it touches our lives. And it's not something that you think about, right? But everything you consume has to be brought to you. And you know, it's the trucking industry is so important to everything that we do, and just that was really cool to kind of get him on the podcast and just hear that.
I've really enjoyed the time I've spent with the folks in the association, because it is like insurance. And I remember when we first met, and we were, not first met, but we were chatting about, us working together. You were like, hey man, if you can make insurance sexy, you guys can do anything. And the trucking is sort of in the same vein. Like their whole group, they know how integral they are to our society, but never really have had the thought process to say we need to tell our own story and share who we are, but in the conversations we've had with them, this is the time to do that, because you're right, nothing gets to our door. Now, I don't know about your homes, but I can tell you that Amazon truck stops at my house a lot.
Every day.
Three
times a day.
It is multiple times a day.
We know our Amazon lady's name.
Oh, yeah.
She gets Christmas packages from us.
They actually put a Partello sticker on the Amazon truck.
Hey, you know what? My wife has figured out that it's a very efficient way for us to shop. But how many trucks did that item go through before it actually reached my door? And that's the part that we talked about with them, and that's pretty crazy. So.
I think, the other thing about Eric is, in that podcast, we got to learn about his passion about cars and things like that. And that's what's cool about our job is we constantly get to sit down with people. I insure the guys who invented the sport of paintball, and to sit down with them and learn their stories so that we can help insure. It's really cool. And the podcast is cool for him because I've been good friends with Eric for years, and there were things that I learned about him in that episode. It's really cool when you just sit down with somebody and you don't talk to them, you just ask questions and learn about them. And that's just one more example.
Well, it's a good point. Like a podcast, it's great. We put it out. We have a team that edits this and makes it a nice package for everybody to consume. But selfishly, as the person in there doing. How often do you sit down with a friend and just go, dude, let me pepper you with questions about what
full hour?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. We never do that. We never do that in business because there's a business purpose for every meeting. We don't have time. We never have time. And this forces, especially, people who are in a startup, you guys are busy, and the person on the other side of the table to actually stop for a moment and have a conversation about them, which is pretty wild. Not everybody likes to talk about themselves as much as I do. So,
well, I'm going to do an Alder plug right now because we're going to have the CEO of Alder on, Michael Davidson, in episode or season 2. And one of the things we do in Alder are Jeffersonian dinners. And the way it was explained to us via Alder was Thomas Jefferson got tired of having these parties where at the end of the night, he really didn't get to know anyone. And so he set these intentional dinners that were in smaller groups with a talking prompt. And the way it worked was you would have a prompt where you can learn about something. Hero's Journey is one we're really connected to. So they provide us content to learn about ahead of time, and we connect to it ourselves. And then when it's your turn, you get 5 minutes to explain to us how that prompt is connected in your own life. And we can't talk to you. All we can do is ask you questions about your relationship to it. And so everybody that's sitting at that table just leans in. Well, it's such like a powerful exercise to learn how to restrain yourself from just talking to people that we're starting to do that in little micro teams within our own company.
Yep.
To teach people that skill.
That's awesome. Yeah, it is a powerful skill. Listening is often forgotten in conversation because everybody focuses on the speaking portion of it. So that's great. I love it. All right, let's move to the next one. Van Lie Dumont.
Von.
Did I nail it?
No.
Von Lie Dumont.
Luckily, she will not be offended.
What do you think? How'd I do? Wait.
That sounded pretty good.
Von Lie Dumont.
Yeah, I think she'll like
Much
that.
better, much
Yeah.
It was pretty good. Come on.
That was
All right,
good.
what do you
That
got?
was good.
All right, so talk to me about this episode. And I know she shared, the story of her mom and the history of her family. Anything stand out to you guys?
Well, I mean, her mom was involved in, the whole, Tippi Hedren coming and creating this, whole new industry for, nail salons throughout the country. And so it was an interesting story. She talked about, her culture and how that's kind of shaped her, and where, she really comes from this place of curiosity. She's just kind of what we're talking about is she's all about, asking questions, and trying to understand people and understand how they work and understand how businesses work, and using that curiosity to transform business.
Right. So Tippi was there at this camp as a volunteer to help these women find a career for themselves. And she started with saying like, well, let's bring in a seamstress and a typist because those are fairly easy to learn and it's a low barrier of entry into the marketplace. But the women, she had these long red manicured nails, and the women, including my mom, were just curious about those nails. And clearly Tippi could just been like, great, thanks for acknowledging my nails. Keep typing, keep sewing. But she paused, right? And she took notice of that curiosity. And they continued to be curious about it. So she continued to take notice of it. And then what she did was she's like, okay, well, maybe there's something here. Let's take one small step. So she went down back to Los Angeles and asked her manicurist, her personal manicurist, would you have any interest in coming up to this camp and teaching these women how to do a basic manicure? And Dusty said yes. So she came up there. And then Tippi took another small step and went to the local beauty school and asked them, would you be willing to take on these 20 women to see that we can get them licensed as manicurists? And that beauty school said yes. And that just like those small steps just led to, what Tippi really wanted was for these 20 women to be able to, provide for their families and start a career. But what they didn't see was that the refugees and immigrants who came after us would learn from my mom and her friends and their friends from them and start what would become an $8.3 billion industry.
So that was...
Yeah, I mean, dude, weird things happened with Vaughn. She used the phrase divergent thinking.
Okay.
Like that's a core value of C3, and she didn't know it. It wasn't like she went and looked it up. She didn't even know who we were. She just showed up to our podcast,
That's awesome.
And so there were a few different like little magical moments where it's like, wow, we are really well aligned with each other. And the chemistry was just beautiful right out of the gate with her. And she's just got this nice way about her. And I mean, so much so that we've engaged her to work with us as a leadership team.
Oh, wow.
And probably one of the most powerful things happened not on our podcast, but we went on hers. And she put Gabe and I don't know where those Legos are around here somewhere. We're on my desk. She gave us each a little Lego box, and we're back to back. She tells Gabe, okay, build a duck with like 10 pieces of Legos and tell Jamie what you're doing. And so a minute and a half later when we turn around, neither of us had anything that looked like a duck, and the two things did not look like each other, and it's a powerful lesson to have empathy to somebody that, hey, what you're saying to me, I might receive differently.
Sure.
And leaning in on how communication works to really flush out if we're aligned or not in what's being said. And she just has a very comfortable, graceful way of managing a room and people. And I mean, she's one of my favorite people.
Yeah, she does a lot of leadership work with play, with Legos and Play-Doh and things on the ground, sitting on the ground and just getting
He's
your hands
using some
dirty.
weird
You
words
gotta
there.
get-
You got to clarify that, Gabe.
Nothing kinky, Jamie.
Yeah, you guys have become really close as partners. It's good. All right, so
You got to have a little fun.
yeah, I mean, heck yeah. I thought this episode, the next one with Scott, was just he's so impressive. This episode, I think, was probably on the scale of interesting. Like, this was way out there in the interesting scale. He brought a lot of energy.
Husing, right?
Yeah, John Husing. So he brought a lot of energy, a lot of just, incredible stories. And I know that this one resonated a lot with you guys.
Yep.
Anything?
Well, my favorite moment. My favorite moment was well, first of all, Scott. We didn't know him.
Right.
New York Times bestseller, and he comes into the room, and it was the same thing. I felt like we were best friends our entire life with the guy. He had unbelievable ability to just immediately connect with people. But my favorite moment was, what was the question you asked him? And he says back to you, "That's one of the best questions I've ever been asked, and no one's ever asked it to me."
I don't remember.
Do you remember what it was? I don't remember what the question was.
Must not have been that good.
Hold on. Cut to Gabe asking that incredible question right now.
So that kind of takes us to, you're in Ramadi in 2006, leading the Echo Company. What, can you give like real life examples of like what you're talking about, where you have this mantra, and you feel like they're going to follow it?
I like it when people ask questions like that too, because I feel after you write a book and you do so many interviews, and I've done like hundreds and hundreds of podcasts and interviews, I never want it to be like this rhetoric, So when you pull a question out like that, get something new, man. I appreciate that. No.
Okay.
So what was cool about that is, I've been working on my listening and empathy skills and all those, which are number one in Gabe's wheelhouse, So to watch him do that was really cool.
I mean, Scott is just such an impressive guy. His career in the military, and he led the surge. We heard about the surge in the news and what that was all about, but you don't really understand it until you hear from him and from what his unit did in probably the worst place in the whole world. And so his book on Echoes of Ramadi was just really great book, but really talked about what life was like from the words of his unit, and just how he led them and how they led each other, and it was just very inspirational.
Well, he doesn't stop there either. He did do that, and then you could just end your relationship with him hearing that and think this is a really impressive person. But then we ended up drinking beer with him, hanging out longer, and he starts talking about all the businesses he's been in and how he transitioned to the business world, and all his nonprofit and charity work, to fundraise and riding across country on motorcycles. I mean, it just like it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
You just continue to be impressed in all these different facets of his life, and it all came out of lessons from, what did he say he was, a 1.9 GPA in high school or something like that. He's like,
he's like barely made it through
high school.
But now he's, out of a New York Times bestseller and just doing amazing things. And it was just kind of very inspirational.
Yeah. And the way his journey, just to your point, just continues to go. Like, you look at your own life, you're like, all right, we continue to create new things, we create new businesses, all these things. But you look at his, you're like, man, I got so much more to do. It like keeps you motivated. It's great.
He owns a drive-through pizza place in Las Vegas.
Why not?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I love it. Okay. Next one is Project Concern International, and her story, the way, she pivoted her life in a moment, right?
From Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just changed everything.
Well, Hannah's just unbelievable person, and the story, if you haven't seen the episode, is pretty much that she's working in the hospitality industry in Las Vegas, seeing exposure to sex trafficking, and makes a decision. I'm going to move to San Diego and enter this industry really without a game plan. I mean, she kind of just came here and started trying to figure it out, and our paths crossed because of some interest in work we had done in that same space. But I mean, really the eye-opening part was when she sat us down and she started training us on like what sex trafficking looks like, how drug distribution is highly correlated to that activity, and how prevalent it is in San Diego.
Yeah.
You know, anybody who has kids, daughters, etc. It's like it's concerning. And so the work she's done and everything was like it was another one of those people that certain people come in and you're just like, I'm connected to this person. You know, she was like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the awareness of it was just mind blowing, and so it was really, I think, impactful to have her on, and just to kind of spread that awareness.
Yeah, you know, we talk about your industry, we've talked about your client, we've talked about all these different things, but that's also it's an important thing to our community, right?
Community.
Like you guys are, this is a San Diego company, right? Like you guys have your employees are here, your families are here. That's an important cause that, to your point, most people that live here probably don't even know how prevalent it is, and it is widely prevalent. It's a big deal here, and I thought that episode really shined a light on the work that they're doing and how she got there, which is crazy, and now the work she's doing to try to bring awareness to it and stop it.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Next up, Phil Dana. Phil Dana. So Dana Point, named after.
That's crazy,
right? Like, is there a Erle Point or
No,
nothing?
I don't think there will be.
Nothing.
There might be some Reid farmland somewhere. I don't know.
Nothing. No, there's definitely. I'm out on that. But anything in this episode that you were like, oh, that's one that will stay with me.
I mean, I think that the most eye-opening piece for me was really just realizing how critical HR is to a company, and it's not about the compliance. Compliance is important, but it's really about how do we develop our people? How do we make them feel that they have a purpose? How do we grow them and let them feel like they're empowered to grow? And that's something that was really lasting. With that Phil offered, and that's since then we've hired a VP of HR and really been intentional. So I think Phil really inspired that.
Yeah, I agree. Well, his backstory on his family legacy in Dana Point, and then enlisting
After 9/11.
Yeah, after 9/11 and coming through military. It's just a really interesting story and path to get there that not very many people take, first of all. But I echo what you say. I mean, it was a monumental mental shift for me in how he spoke about the role of HR. We're so, on our side of the business, we're so driven in compliance and lawsuits,
right?
Because that's what our products do is interact with us. That hearing him talk about intentional alignment and career development and its role of how it's tied to operations, it really changed the way we thought. And then a few months later, Lindsay Patton walks into our life and we're introduced to her.
Yep.
And because of him, we were able to consume what she was saying to us, because otherwise the thing she said might have been the first time we heard him, if not but for Phil.
Right.
And so it was really cool to just hear somebody, or if anybody out there is listening who wants to grow a company, then understanding that approach to people it's paramount.
And I love how when we set out on this project, it was a purpose of providing value, doing these interviews. It was a little self-serving too, right? Like we want to share our story of C3, and then through the journey of interviewing all these people, you guys probably learned as much or more than others have, and you're like, it's wild to see how it's impacted your own business a year later.
Yeah,
it is.
And you get charged, like when you do these podcasts, you just get charged up and excited,
right?
Because you're just learning.
Yeah, and you get an opportunity to interact with folks that you normally would not, right? Like, I mean, when would you have sat down with Phil Dana, right? And now
Never.
Now you did, and now all of a sudden now you've got a VP of HR, and now you've changed the way you're going about structuring your whole organization. It's pretty wild. I love it.
Right? Even Scott Husing, he posted something about us the other day, and I was like, we've become friends with people who come on and stuff, and I'm like, it happened to be a day where I was kind of having a shitty day or something, and then I saw him post that, and I'm like, hell yeah,
that's pretty
like,
cool.
That's pretty cool. You know, like it kind of perked me up. You know?
I love it. Yeah, that is great. And you guys are very good in the relationship growth side of things. So I'm not surprised that, people come on the podcast like, I wouldn't mind having a beer with those guys.
Yeah.
That's how we got to know each other. So, all right, next up is...
There's a whole story there.
Yeah,
but,
a lot of beers.
We'll save that for another time.
That's a whole episode. All right, Chalatna Lake Lodge. Did I get it?
Directly tied back to Nick, actually.
Which is crazy, right?
I don't know if I said this on the podcast or not. I don't remember. Do you guys remember? I did. Yeah. Well, anyways, I was trying to figure something out, and the math wasn't working. And I remember Hardwick telling me about how he went up there with Rivers. He took all the linemen up, and Nick wasn't an outdoor fitness guy at the time, and he ended up coming back from that trip saying it was just life-changing. So I reach out to Matt because Nick put us in contact, and I'm like, man, I think we can pull this thing off. I go to Gabe. I'm like, it's going to cost us a little bit of money, but I think this is going to be a once-in-a-lifetime thing for the people we take. And it was nothing short of that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was incredible. The relationships that we made out there, when you're out in the woods and there's no cars, the only way to get there is like a puddle jumper. You land in the lake. It's kind of sits right there on the edge of Denali National Park.
Yeah.
We got to helicopter around glaciers and
it's wild.
Jumping naked into cold pools.
Whoa, easy.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to mention that.
That's a visual. Thanks for that.
Well, you can Google Alaska and find a million amazing places to go, but I would say Matt is also an instrumental part of that experience. I mean, he's a young, enthusiastic, vibrant guy, passionate about Alaska, super fun. Being from the Midwest, kind of feels like a good old boy from the Midwest. That you trust your sister with or something, and he and his team made it so fun up there.
Well, it's sort of. It goes back to the common thread of all of this, right? Like the space or the industry or any of that could be amazing, but it's the people that really take it to the next level. Like you could get to this amazing, beautiful place in the middle of Alaska with puddle jump in, and that by itself is special. But then you put this person in there that really loves it and shares with you why you should love it as much as they do, and that just takes it to the next level. So that's pretty cool. That's awesome. All right, so last one was Scott Mason, and his story, who he is, and how that all came, and how his whole life has unfolded. Anything stand out to you guys?
His passion, for everything. His passion, he has a podcast. I think it's Passion for Purpose.
Okay.
And it's really everything he does is intentional, and he gets excited about everything, and you feel that when you talk to him.
First of all, in terms of who I am always forward thinking, and one of the things that I feel like we have in common is an understanding of the nature of what that forward thinking mentality is like within me, at least, and that is about the importance of connection. I really pride myself and view at my core the ethos of creating community and connection between people, meaningful connection. And so that's the one sentence answer to your first question. But
he did a whole diatribe on how important insurance was and what the purpose of insurance was. And we're like, wow, we need to use that.
I was like, I'm fired up.
Yeah. We're like, well, we didn't really like insurance before this,
Do you put that in all your presentations?
Yeah. We should. And he basically can see in everything and every job and for what everyone does, how you can turn that into a purpose.
Yep.
And that was inspiring.
That's great.
Actually, we connected him to one of our large nonprofit clients, and he was helping them create some content for their new hire orientation onboarding program. He's the kind of guy, Scott, if you hear this, I apologize in advance, but I didn't prepare for that interview. I came in cold. I looked at the brief right before it, and I thought to myself, well, this is going to be an interesting one, and then it was understated to say it that way, because he comes on and he looks a little bit like he could be Tony Robbins' brother. Sounds like it. His personality, we're all sitting around talking like this before we get started. It's just like instant connection, like your best friend for life. He was just amazing. And then, so as I wake up in the morning and I might strum through LinkedIn or something, he's one of my favorite people to just see in the feed, and I'll always stop and listen to it, hit the like button. Sometimes I'll drop a comment. And like a couple weeks of doing that, I get a voicemail from him. Hey, I just wanted to thank you. You're interacting with my content, and I really appreciate it, Jamie. I hope you have an amazing day. And I'm
That's
like,
awesome.
It's just every interaction with him just is positive, feels good, uplifting, and what he can do to get involved with an organization and help connect purpose and energy is unbelievable.
Yeah, and it is funny how important that is to an organization. I think, you guys have done a good job of, I've been to a few of your events, that there is a lot of energy. You've got, there's some people that work here that also, you've hired people that bring that energy as well, and from all different facets, but how important that is to the culture and to the success of an organization. I mean, no matter if it's a business or a sports team or whatever it is, if there's not that energy at the core of it that's driving everybody to want to do more, it falls flat.
You know what it is? You extracted it. I don't know if when you were here interviewing everybody, we were recording that day, and we're sitting there listening. I'm like, Gabe, this is like the 8th time somebody else who didn't hear everybody else said, I can just be me here. And I know we have a little bit of a brand of celebrating, which we do.
Sure.
Fun is a core value, and we're not going to apologize for it.
Nope.
But at the same time, people can be who they are here. If that's not their thing, that's cool too. Not everybody fits a mold.
Right.
But so many people come from places in our industry where they can't celebrate. They can't be them. They have to fit a box. And that's what's great about us. You don't have to be a partier to come here. You can not be. We need people who aren't all just celebrating all the time. People doing work, right?
We got to work sometime.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
But hearing people say that, it was so powerful. I was like, that's amazing. We really got to lean into, people being able to be themselves in a work environment.
It was funny when that did happen. I love when you go through a day of interviews and you're talking to people and you start to see consistent themes.
Yeah, there's themes.
It's really good when they're positive, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
I've also been in those rooms where they're not, right?
Right.
When you're trying to help a business grow and you're realizing, we have a problem, right?
Oh, we've done it with clients where you're like, I don't think we're going to, we just move on to the next guy. We're not going to get something positive out of this
This
one.
isn't going to work. But it's, you're sitting there and you're going, okay, in that day, it was, you started to sort of see, and it wasn't from, to your point, it wasn't from a group of people that all fit similar.
Mold.
Yeah, they weren't all the same age. They weren't all the same. It was all over the board, and people telling stories of how other employees, backed them up. I loved it. It was motivating for me that day, and it was pretty special. I'm glad that it has now become something that you guys focus on, and sometimes, most of the time, our best lessons come from everybody else, right?
Yeah.
If you actually just listen, you can learn. So,
Absolutely.
All right. I've been waiting for this part. This is my favorite part.
I don't even know where this came from.
Yeah,
It just happened.
Well, yeah. So Jamie, you guys have a unique relationship, right? It's like brothers, big brother. You guys rotate roles of playing the big brother depending upon the situation. If it's like a fun kind of jovial situation, Jamie's the big brother kind of picking on Gabe. If it's like a real business situation, Gabe steps in. He's like, we got to do it seriously. And so I love on the podcast that like when we were at dinner and Gabe wasn't there, we're all texting Gabe, thanks for paying, Gabe, like having a little fun at Gabe's expense. Like I enjoy that. So do you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So to open the podcast, you've always intro Gabe, and so our crack staff behind the scenes has actually gone back and pulled all the different ways that you've introed.
Well, I think the crack staff had a part in this because they're like, you're so freaking stiff, man. We're trying to cut these intros, and I'm like, how does Jeff do it? Jeff Lozano, he's rolling that Hispanic voice in his intros and stuff, and I'm trying to watch him.
He's got so much flavor and energy, and you're like, God, I want to, And so this was your
I think it
way.
evolved out of these guys telling me, be less stiff, bro.
I love it.
I think my wife got a little nervous on this after hearing a few of those intros.
Does she start giving you nicknames at home now?
Yeah,
Oh, that's good.
I've got all kinds now.
We should do an episode with his wife.
Oh,
and
that would
just
be
go through
amazing.
all the nicknames that she's given you. That'd be really fun. All right. I'm going to read them off, and then you guys can say if you've got a favorite or a non-favorite or something that you really enjoy. All right, so in the Nick Hardwick episode, it was the ever sexy Gabe
Oh, I
Erle.
like that one.
That's-
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
that's
Gabe's
a
like,
good
that's a
one.
very accurate description.
Yeah. Well, it started there and it went downhill. But this is a good one, though. The yin to my yang.
Ooh.
That's nice. That feels very
That,
romantic.
that one makes
Yeah.
our wives a little jealous.
Yeah. Next up was the ever professional Gabe Erle. That must have been after a.
It was a serious one.
That was a serious one. My witty partner, Gabe Erle.
Ooh, a little
Witty.
My
Witty.
pal and co-host.
You are my pal.
I feel that feels
Brethren.
nice.
Oh, don't touch the
And
light.
then we had a mistake here, guys.
So we double up?
We doubled up. The ever professional. So I've decided that the ever professional is after one of those big brother moments where you're the big brother and you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
the professional guy showed up last night. So the ever professional.
That was before we had HR.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, see, that's one less thing you have to worry about now.
Exactly.
I love it. Okay. Next up was my trusty sidekick. It's pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
like superhero-esque, or I
Yeah.
picture like a cartoon with like Jamie's up on the horse and then Gabe rides up on like on a donkey.
I was thinking of me on a motorcycle and him in a little sidecar. Yeah.
Like my trusty sidekick. Yeah, there he
Wayne
is.
seeing me on the donkey.
We need a picture of us in a sidecar motorcycle.
Oh, absolutely.
Who
I know-
has
I
one
know
of
a
those
guy
out
who
there?
can make that.
I do too, actually.
Yeah.
Did he say little?
It's messed up, man. All right, next up was not so good fly fisherman and sometimes moose bait. There's got to be a story
Yeah,
there.
that's definitely my favorite for you.
What
I don't know what that's about.
Well, because the only time he caught salmon in Alaska is when he hooked them in the back. So that's where it came from. And these
pretty
jerks iced me over moose, so I just threw moose bait in there because I had to do a double icing in that one.
Oh,
Yeah, we
Yeah,
got him. We got
they
him
got me
back.
good. It was like an hour-long setup to get me a double ice takedown.
Wow.
Over a moose off on the hills that they were saying had a tag, and they're bringing them down. They're all pretending to look at them through these binoculars that were taped up, smearing off ices.
It was actually, they were smearing off ices and not the binoculars.
And they kept
But
asking me that. They're like, "Oh, you want to see them?" And I'm like, "Nah, it's cool." You know, I'm like, "Whatever." And then finally, they're like, "No, you should really look." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And then
double
I'm
ice.
Like, "Oh,
Do we have photos of the
man."
double icing?
I think so.
That's
Yeah.
pretty
Here's-
good.
yeah.
I would love
Put them out
that.
there.
I would love to see that. That's good. All right, last one was just my buddy.
My buddy.
My buddy.
That's like from the movie Elf. It must have been Christmas time.
It's pretty good. Yeah, might have been my little buddy. So that's it. That's what I got.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we've got season 1 is in the books. Was in the books, and now we're moving on to season 2.
Yep.
And how do you anything that you're like a dream guest, somebody that you're like, man, if we could talk to so and so, we could, is there somebody that you're excited to try to get on the show this year?
Damn, that's a good question.
Thinking like maybe the CEO of CUENTO.
That would
He's
really.
a tough get, man.
Yeah.
That guy does not like a microphone.
Yeah, I mean, it would be good to have a shout out, but I mean, we do have several amazing people lined up to come on, and so I'm super excited about getting season 2 out there. I don't know, who would we say? It needs to be somebody local.
Yeah, because you got this fancy new setup. We're ready to roll over here.
I know.
Well, what we'll do is we'll call it a tease.
You know what? You know who it would be? It would be the owners of Ballast Point. I think that would be a really great one because those guys came in and are saving a brand that's a hallmark in this city. And what we're trying to do is C3 is similar to what they're trying to do. We've spent a little time with them with you. They're super interesting guys. The moves they're making, what you all are doing with their brands off the charts. I mean, I'd be really interested to just get one-on-one time to extract that story out of them.
Yeah, it's a wild story, and
Yeah.
they are interesting characters. Yeah, that's a good one. I think
you-
I know
can
a
you
guy who
help-
might
can
be able
you
to help
help
with
us? Can you help
that.
us?
Yeah, I know somebody who might be able to help with that. Well, all right. Well, just thanks so much for taking the time to listen to Jamie and Gabe break down. Thank you guys for having me. Obviously, you went through a list of people who weren't available today, so I'm glad that I could be here. Nick Hardwick was obviously busy, so you guys brought me in. But, we're obviously excited to be part of this project with you guys, and I love learning the lessons that you get to learn along the way as well. I know, for me, our business is a few years behind you in age, and we get to sort of, similar to the way you guys with Coastal Credit, we were able to like listen to them and hear their experiences. We're able to do the same thing. So we thank you for that. And thanks for everybody for tuning in and checking these guys out.
Well, hey, we thank you too, Wayne. I mean, your partnership with us and CUENTO and C3 together is amazing. You don't feel like you're years behind us. I mean, we feel like we're just in lockstep with each other. And it's been a beautiful thing to work with you guys and bring light to the brand.
Much love, baby.